Hello, thank you for joining us. Last time we worked on cleaning up some dirty, filthy axles and lubing them. Today we're going to walk through tearing apart a transmission and relubing the inside of it. This right here is out of our project Ugly Duckling, and this transmission is caked in filth like the axles was. We got lucky on the axles because once we cleaned away all the filth, we found nice, good, serviceable parts inside that weren't in bad shape at all. The plastic was in good shape, the gears were in good shape, just needed some lubing. Let's hope it turns out the same here with this transmission. So let's go through the steps that we need to do to clean this up. The first step in cleaning this up is going to be just like with the axles. We're going to take an old toothbrush and we're going to scrub away the loose dirt. Now once we get this done, we will take it to a sink. We'll use dish soap and water and our handy dandy toothbrush here and scrub away all the dirt we can. Get as much off of it as possible. And that way it'll make it easier to work with, and once we take it apart, if individual parts need cleaned up, we can take those and do the same thing to them. Because some of these, like, you can't get in between the case here and the gear cover, or the motor plate. So those may need to come apart to be able to get in on. Okay, so let's get this thing cleaned up. Okay, we have the transmission cleaned up here. As you can tell, she cleaned up nicely. Yeah, still some more cleaning to do, which will get easier as we take it apart. The first thing we want to do is remove this gear cover. There's 3 screws around the edges of it here. Let's remove those. Okay, got the cover off. Next we're going to go ahead and take off the drive shafts. Just a screw through on each side. Next up we want to remove the spur gear slipper. Have the nut here on the end. We've just got to take this off. You can use your little 4-way wrench for this. Just remember the parts you take off in the order they come off in. If you happen to forget, the upside is you can download the exploded views from Axial Racing's website. And they are invaluable for finding part numbers or just taking things apart and putting them back together. So we got the nut, the spring, and we got this big metal washer pad here. Honestly, we should be able to pull this all off together. Yeah, pretty close. There we go. We have the pads and 2 metal pieces. So we set those aside. And then next up we have to take off this motor plate here. So that comes off through these 3 screws right here. Got the screws out. Now we can pull off the motor plate. Set it aside. And now whenever we go to pull off the part that covers the spur gear, there's this little cone shaped piece here. You need to go ahead and pull it off as well. Then off comes this cover. And there we go. You can see how much dirt was back behind there. We got a lot of it out, but we're going to go ahead and clean this up the rest of the way before we tear it apart. Just in case the inside does look good, we don't want to contaminate it. This would also be a good time to go ahead and do the drive shafts and the motor plate and spur gear covers that you took off. It's now time to separate these halves. You have a bolt through right here with a lock nut on one end. We got to take it apart and then we'll be ready to separate these 2 halves of the case. Okay, now we're ready to pull the halves apart. Do so slowly. And there we go. That's what the inside looks like. This one, the grease is broke down pretty good inside there. Tell there has been a lot of water and gunk and muck inside this transmission. Let's pull the gears out. This little idler gear is usually what goes inside these transmissions if you have one go. This one actually looks in pretty good shape. We're going to leave these ones in here for now, though this truck will probably get an eventual upgrade to brushless, and at that point we'll swap these out for all metal gears, probably from hot racing. But for right now we're just going to leave the stock gears in it. Now on the top shaft, let me show you how you pull it out. You have to push the shaft through. There's a little pin right here. We pull this pin out, set it aside so you don't lose it. There's my little RPM tray. And then you pull it back through this way. And then the top gear comes out. As you can tell, that grease is pretty funky in there. But that gear looks pretty good too. We'll know more once we get her cleaned up. And now for the locker. Let's pull this out. Looks to be in pretty good shape. Now we'll have to pull the bearings out of the case. Just push them out. Now this one right here, there's this little cover on this side. You can press through something through the hole in it and knock it out, and then just push this one through. And there we go. We have the whole thing disassembled. Now it's time to clean up these gears. You can take and spray some alcohol on them, and clean them up real good that way. Some nitro cleaner, that works good too. I'm going to take some dish soap and toothbrush, scrub them down real good, get all the gunk and grime off of them, and dry them off, and then be ready to re-lube and reinstall. Also want to do the same thing to the inside of the case. I need to clean out all this old gunk inside here and this little bit of dirt that got in through the seams in it. So take care of that now, and then we'll be ready to put her back in the truck. Also on the bearings, we have to clean them up as well. On these though, I will do the alcohol method. I will take some alcohol in my spray bottle here, just like I did with the axles. We'll spray the bearing, and then rub it in real good. Rub it real good. Clean all the surfaces. Make sure the bearing feels nice and smooth. And these bearings look a lot better than the ones we had in the axles. So hopefully they're in better shape. And it feels nice and smooth. So I'll do that to the rest of the bearings and get everything cleaned up and get it all ready to re-lube and reassemble. Now it's time for some reassembly. We're going to start by putting our plug in, like so. Then we'll take our large bearings, push them into the case. Do that for both halves. And then do the same for our small top bearings. Next up, we will take our large gear and drop it in there. Now we take our marine grease. This right here I got at the local Walmart. You can get it pretty much anywhere. Just make sure you get marine grease because it helps repel water and it doesn't fling off the gears. Take this little wooden stick here I got from the craft store. Put some lube right here on the big gear. Giving it a little bit of a spin and adding some more. Just keep doing that till you get all the way around the gear. Some people may say this is overkill, but I'd rather have too much on it than not enough. Okay, there we go. We're all the way around the gear. After you've done the locker, go ahead and do the center gear. Give a good coating grease on it, and then slide it into the case. Like so. There we go. Actually, I want to show you something here about this top shaft real quick. Sometimes this flange right here, just whenever it's machined, will have a bit of a lip here and it's hard to get the bearing over. So let's go ahead and pop the bearing back out of the other case half. Because what we're going to go ahead and do here is we're going to put it on first. Then we will slide our gear on. Oops, turn the gear over the other way. There we go. We'll make sure that your little holes in it are facing up. We'll take our pin, we'll put it in the end of the shaft, like so. And then slide the gear up so it engages, and then push the bearing up. Okay, now we're going to put a little bit of grease on this gear. It's maybe some people a bit much, but to keep water out and keep everything lubed, I like to have a little bit of extra grease in here. Yeah, it does create a little bit of extra friction, but in the long run I think it's worth it. Let's take this gear, slide it on home, like so. And we'll take our other case half and slide it down over it, like that. There we go. Take a paper towel here, wipe off any excess that's squished out. Okay. Next, take your nut and screw here and put them through the case to bolt it back down together. Okay, now have our screw in. Don't tighten this down all the way yet, just make it reasonably snug. And now we'll go ahead and put on our gear cover. Line it up, and then we put on our motor plate. Like so. Now we'll flip it over and we'll start feeding the screws through. The 3 long ones you took out earlier. You may have to thread them through, sometimes you do. They will go through the spur gear cover and into the motor plate. Don't tighten them down all the way yet, you just want them tight enough to hold everything together. Go ahead and do the other 2. Okay, now that we have them in there, we just want to go and tighten down all the screws. You don't want to over tighten them, just give them a good, make them good and snug. Do that for the 3 holding on the motor plate and for the 1 with the nut on it. If you over tighten them, it'll deform the case and will also make the gears bind. After you have them all tight, give it a little bit of a spin. Make sure everything still spins smoothly. And we're ready for the next step, which is putting on the slipper. It is now time to reinstall the slipper. We start by putting this little cone-shaped sleeve back on, the big side facing outward. And then we go and put on this pad, first disc. Slides up with some slots on the shaft. After that goes your spur gear with your slipper pads on it. These pads are kind of worn. I will be replacing them. I just didn't have any in my box right now, so I'm going to go ahead and put this back on. And then, once my motor comes and I go to put it in, I will go ahead and take this off and replace these pads. Slide it on the shaft like so. Next comes your other plate. Rotate it around so it slides down on the slots. There we go. Then comes your spring. And finally, the nut. Now to adjust the slipper, we start by tightening it down all the way. Okay, we have her tight. Now the stock manual says to loosen it up 1.5 turns. That's what stock is. People run different settings on theirs. It all depends on how well your pads is, what kind of motor you're running, what kind of guts you got inside the transmission. For stock guts and stock axle guts, 1.5 turns is good because it does a lot of good slippage. I run a little bit tighter on my cheat bolt because I have the hot racing gears inside the tranny and the hardened gears inside the axles. But we'll go ahead and back this one off. First we'll start by 1/2 turn and 1 full turn. And on this one I'm only going to go ahead and take it a full half since I'm going to replace the pads anyway. And there we go. She is ready now. The next step is we can go ahead and put our gear cover on. For our gear cover though, I'm going to go ahead and just throw it on here and just put 1 screw in, barely holding it, because like I said, I'm waiting for my motor to get here. And then I'll have to pull this back off then to put the motor in. Okay. Next up will be the drive shafts. Slip those on and then put on the screws that came out of those. Go ahead and tighten these down all the way. On this drive shaft right here, it has some lines cut into it, some grooves, but I don't think they're bad enough to weaken the drive shaft, so we're going to go ahead and reuse it. One thing to make sure of on these is there is a screw down inside here that holds this metal piece onto this plastic shaft. You want to make sure that it is nice and tight. Easier to do it now when the drive shafts are apart than to have to pull it apart on the trail and tighten one down. And there we have it. The completed transmission assembly. Everything's been cleaned and lubed. Turned out to be a pretty good looking transmission. Good on the inside. Everything feels good. So now she's ready to put back in the truck. I hope you found this video useful. I hope you've enjoyed it. Go ahead and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of our future project or how-to videos. Feel free to comment down below or hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, email. All the links are also below in the description. This truck still has a long way to go, but Ugly Duckling's slowly becoming a swan. So let's just hang tight and see what happens. Thanks for watching. Until next time, happy RCing.